Oh, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is there. It's 10:02 p.m. here. How you doing? I've got some really interesting stuff that I want to lay on you guys. Um, a while back, I wrote something that I never really published, but I made several videos called Lucifer's Reich. Lucifer's Reich. And interesting title, but it was very heartfelt and very deserved. And it was a special, in-depth investigation study and revealing of all the facts that we do have regarding the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And it was chock full of facts and following the history of certain agencies and etc. after his assassination. And what this was intended to show was the people that were involved, the political figures that came up through the history of the United States then after that assassination, the people that benefited directly from his assassination, the people that were paid off for helping to cover it up, and etc. It was a very, very in-depth and revealing study. And the facts were gleaned from all over the place. But every single one of them was vetted and credible. These were, for instance, courtroom testimonies. A lot of this stuff is part of the official record, and yet glossed over, hushed, silenced, distracted. We're distracted away from the truth constantly. But my premise of this whole thing was that in 1963, there was a successful coup of the United States of America. And it was performed not necessarily just by our alphabet agencies, but it was a combination that included our alphabet agencies, our Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it goes far beyond the military-industrial complex, a little bit beyond that. Let's face it, this is military, industrial, political, and media, all combined together, the most powerful people on earth behind it all. How you doing, Stefan? It's good to see you. So, just the stuff about Oswald alone is enough to write books over, and many books have been written. Oswald is an interesting figure. Now, you've got to understand the atmosphere in the 1960s. There was in the 50s and 60s. We were in a Cold War. By Cold War, we were fresh out of World War II, which saw the United States and Russia were allies during World War II, but suddenly, after the defeat of the Germans, we just decided, hey, Stefan, well, that doesn't surprise me, bud. Bless her little heart. I used to go and visit her channel a lot and sit up and talk to her, and she'd be so sweet to me. She's such a sweet lady. She really is. But bless her heart, she would treat me like gold and be so polite and nice and kind. But then when I had a falling out with Bill, she had a wrench and she started like getting rid of my subscribers. Seriously, I ain't kidding you. I ain't kidding. Blocking my subscribers. And I said, well, why did you do that, Linda? Come on. And I took her wrench, and bless her heart, she was hurt because I took her wrench. And I said, I am not trying to hurt your feelings, Linda. I forgive you. I love you. But I can't trust you. So she let me on her channel a few times then, and we got along and we talked. And I've got one video, though. If you look in my videos, you'll see one where I have a discussion with, what's his name? He's, hello, Sherry. But I've got one where I'm thanking Linda for allowing me to have a discussion with, what's his fella? He does the shows every once in a while on Psalms. Ted. Me and Ted talking about something that was near and dear to him. And I thanked her for being so kind. She was really kind to me on that. You ought to hear. And then I see her in the chats when Bill and Bruce and everybody's having their little chats. And bless her heart, she's talking about, Eric's love. And then you see piles of doo-doo, And, he's a fake Christian. But bless her heart, we get along so good when I do see her and I say hi. So I feel for Linda. I really do. I don't say any of this in a way that would be disrespectful to her. I feel sorry for Linda, and I mean that sincerely. But anyway, I did this massive study. Part of the study that I did was on Oswald himself. Now, there's some really weird points about Oswald. He was a fatherless child, brought up by his mother, raised by his mother. He was a pretty brilliant guy. And he was not a sharpshooter by any means. He wasn't a man that was very used to shooting a gun, even though he was in the military. He was in military intelligence. He had a top secret clearance, and he worked with our most secret bombers and surveillance planes. He was stationed at Atsuka, Japan. And so he was literally trusted with our most classified weaponry. I kid you not. Atsuka, Japan. Now, while he was in Japan, for no apparent reason, he started learning Russian and started talking about all of this, communist stuff around people. And this was a game. We'll see Oswald play in this sort of a game several times in his career. But he was setting something up. Because next thing you know, the man is defecting to Russia. And when he defects to Russia, all of a sudden, one of our spy planes is shot down. Boom. And they say, uh-oh, that was because of Oswald. Oswald gave top secret information to the Russians, and they've shot down our spy plane. He would have known about the SR-71 and all our stuff there. And so they shot down one of our spy planes, and they blamed all of this on Oswald. And Oswald he wants to totally defect over there. He renounces his U.S. citizenship, and he meets this girl named Marina. And she just so happens to be the daughter of a very influential a general, Russian general. I mean, this guy's highly placed. And Oswald just happens to meet and fall in love with his daughter, and she allegedly falls in love with him. Well, she did. She did fall in love with him, even by her own testimony. And I've seen her testimony, her personal testimony, not secondhand. So, anyway, this whole thing now, so he goes from having this top secret security clearance and this top secret position at one of our most secure bases in the world, handling our most secure technology. He defects, renounces his citizenship, in effect, gives them one of our spy planes, marries this Russian general's daughter, and then he decides after a few years he's going to come back home. Yep. Now, that would have been a dangerous thing to do for a traitor who had defected to Russia. You see, when Russians defect over to the United States, if they really defect with top secret information, then they try to kill them. I mean, they literally tried to kill these guys. Well, that's what happened with Oswald. And this was back during a time we just got over the Nuremberg trials and the trials where they were looking and crucifying communists in the United States. The Rosenberg trials, look that up, where they were convicted of being communist sympathizers. An American citizen couldn't be a communist sympathizer back then. That's how free they were. Well, you see, this was part of the military-industrial complex. They had to build this sort of animosity and keep this sort of animosity up. As long as there's a state of confusion and etc., and a state of war, you can take up people's entire living and just leave them enough for a few breadcrumbs. And you'll be cool because you're protecting them from all these guys, so they think. Well, anyway, Oswald decides he wants to come back to the United States at a time and in a situation where they surely would have arrested him. They surely would have pressed charges against him, and he would not have gone to civilian court. He would have gone before a military tribunal. Nothing. What's strange about this is he didn't even have the money. These are all facts, guys. Look it up. You can Google every bit of this. Common knowledge. Now, I would show you all my work, the notes and the book and the recordings that I did for Lucifer's Reich. But like I said, I didn't put the information in the book. I put it on video, and unfortunately, YouTube destroyed my channel because they said it was full of hate speech. Hillary for Prison 2016 is official hate speech, by the way. So anyway, not only did Oswald want to come home, and not only is this weird in that they pressed no charges against him at all for being a traitor and for giving top secret information to the Russians and for downing one of our planes, losing one of our planes. We gave him the money to come home. The government did. He didn't even have enough money to come back to the United States. They let him bring his wife back with him to the United States, who was the daughter of this highly placed general, Russian general. He got to bring his entire family back to the United States, and the United States government gave him the money to bring them all and to help them get set up once they got back, and not pressing one charge against him at all for the heinous act of treason against every man, woman, and child in America. Now, he was also, we know this for a fact, these things are proven. He had CIA handlers. He hung out with people that were like CIA. He lived with people that were CIA. These people were the ones that helped handle him. And a lot of these people ended up dead under very suspicious circumstances. A lot of these people did. So it's really interesting. But Oswald was given the money to come back to America, and he started running into people like Guy Bannister, David Ferry, and these are people that were part of the alphabet agencies and men that would eventually help assassinate President Kennedy. Now, while all of this was going on, Oswald began to work. Oswald was already working in CIA. All of this is obvious since he was had the top secret security clearance, went over to Russia, defected, comes back, marries this woman, comes back with after treasonous actions. He's not met with any harm whatsoever. No jail time. Nothing. We pay his way back. So not only is he working for the CIA, but all of a sudden now he also gets put on the FBI payroll. So he was earning like $200 a week, or was it a month? I believe it was a month. So I'm sorry. I don't want to misspeak. He was making about $200 a month just from the FBI, which wasn't bad for doing almost nothing. But one of the things that he did have to do, we had the little guy that was in charge of the FBI, man. He had the files on everybody. Anyway, President Kennedy was leaning on the FBI. And he says, look, the CIA is setting up training camps somewhere here in the United States. And they're taking Cuban nationals and they're training them, getting them ready for a coup to try to overthrow Castro. And I want to know where those training camps are. So Kennedy comes to the FBI. He demands that they find this out. And Lee Harvey Oswald happens to be their inside man. Lee Harvey Oswald helps them find these training camps, one of which was at Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana. And it was raided. Cuban nationals were arrested. Guns were confiscated. Grenades were confiscated. Rounds of ammunition were confiscated. The training camp was torn down. David Ferry had helped out with that training camp. Bannister had helped out with that training camp. And they knew Oswald was the rat. They knew Oswald was the rat. So then we have all kinds of courtroom information, etc. all kinds of sworn testimony, even from the parties involved of these assassination teams that came from Miami, Florida to Dallas, Texas. Now, the amazing thing is that there were a lot of people in Dallas, Texas that day. George Herbert Walker Bush was in town that day. Richard Milhous Nixon, our president, future president, was there that day. No, and of course, George Herbert Walker Bush was also a future president. He was there. So at the time, George Herbert Walker Bush was helping with the Cuban nationals. He was in oil, and he had a big freighter, an oil freighter, and it was called the Barbara. You can Google this too. And George Herbert Walker Bush, what he was doing is he was taking the Cuban nationals, smuggling them into the United States, taking them to these training camps, getting them trained, and then taking them back to a camp where they could await and get ready for an invasion. And then when it was time to invade, we had what we called the Bay of Pigs invasion. And what they did, George Herbert Walker Bush took this shipload of men that had been trained by the CIA in the United States of America. He took this shipload of men and dumped them in Cuba on the beach so that they could invade and overthrow Castro. Now, they knew that these men would not be able to take Cuba. The Cuban army came in there and started wiping them out immediately. And they got frantically on their radios to the president, directly to the president. And the CIA, Alan Dulles, Richard Bissell, and all these guys, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're saying, help us, help us. You've got to invade and help these people that are being annihilated. Kennedy said, well, where did they come from? We just dumped them on the beach. Well, I'm sorry. Either you get them out of there or they're going to die. And most of them were killed. Lots of them were imprisoned. They lost their entire army. Now, it was during this time that we had what was called Operation Northwoods. Oh, my goodness. Google that one. Operation Northwoods. What's Operation Northwoods? Well, you see, this is all part of the same scheme. The powers that be wanted to go to war against Cuba so bad that they were willing to sacrifice their own people. Operation Northwoods, if you Google that, you can pull up the declassified plan with the actual signatures from the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the papers. And you can see that they were planning, or they were literally suggesting things like, let's hijack a plane. Say that it was full of Cuban nationals and we can smash them into important American landmarks. Say Cuba did it. Or we can wait till John Glenn gets ready to take off in his rocket. You shoot it down and we can say the Cubans did it. They were willing to do this. That is on the paper, in writing, and signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But they had to pass this up to Kennedy to get it approved and turn it into official U.S. policy, albeit a top secret, absolutely classified agenda that would be totally hidden from the people. But Kennedy didn't have the expected reaction. with everything that just happened with the Bay of Pigs and now this Operation Northwoods, he fired General Lemniker, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He fired Richard Bissell. He fired Alan Dulles, the number one and the number two man in the CIA. He fired them. And he swore that he was going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces any minute. And that's about the time he came out with the famous speech where he talks about the idea of a secret organization is repugnant to a free nation. That's exactly what he was talking about. All of these things that were going on behind the scenes that were kept from the American people because the media has always been a part of this. So anyway, Kennedy is assassinated. They say this lone nut did it. Now, there's some really interesting things that go on then. One of the things that go on is he's rushed to the hospital. Well, first of all, if you look at the Zapruder film, I'll tell you what you're going to see. You're going to see Kennedy get shot, and then you're going to see people rushing to the grassy knoll. Not to the bookstore, not to the book repository, where Oswald allegedly was and was not. They're running to the grassy knoll. They're running towards the railroad tracks because that's where most of those guns were fired from. Now, there was probably a shot or two or three fired from the upper floor there at the book depository, that's for sure. There was also other guns that were fired from across the street from that's for sure. And the Angola Bush War, Castro got so infuriated with his commander's inability to contain the South Africans that he literally directed his forces from Havana by phone. Hey, Ben. Amen. Yeah. Well, you see, Kennedy didn't want to go to war unnecessarily. He certainly didn't want to just force a war with Cuba when Cuba really wasn't bothering anybody. Now, when we did have a problem with Cuba, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy was kind of like Trump. He took care of it in a bold way. And people were frightened over that. But when he got angry, you see, he stopped that flow of money that the military-industrial government / media complex is so used to. When he refused to go to war with Cuba, and he said, no, I'm not going to invade Vietnam either. I'll send a few advisors. And that's it. They weren't even supposed to have guns. They were supposed to be just a few advisors. See, Kennedy cared about the lives of our soldiers. He cared about the economy of our nation. He knew that we didn't have to go to war. As a matter of fact, Kennedy's view of the world and hope for the world was that the nations would get along. Anyway, again, I digress. So Kennedy is shot. The bullets are coming from every which direction. You've got the Zapruder film that is put under wraps for 12 years. They won't let the American public see it. They confiscate all of the film that people had taken in their cameras and movie cameras and etc. They confiscated all of that. And when they rushed Kennedy to the hospital, some direct action was taken. Some of the things that were done was, for instance, pictures were taken of those wounds. There were drawings made of those wounds, every wound in his body. There was verbal description given of all of those wounds. And then our government, see, there should have been an autopsy done right then, right there. That was law. That was the law. There should have been an autopsy done right then, right there. That body was a crime scene. But instead of letting the law run its course, his body was illegally hijacked by the alphabet agencies, including the FBI, the Secret Service, and etc. His body was hijacked, it was taken to the plane, and by the time they got to the Bethesda hospital, they had to go through the very same examinations, examining all of the wounds, etc. And the descriptions were different. As a matter of fact, when they did the autopsy, a lot of strange things went on. His brain is missing, folks. His brain is missing. They had it at one time. People say, well, maybe it was all blown away. No, they had his brain. And granted, there were parts of it blown out, but they had his brain. They no longer have his brain. They don't know how or when or where that brain disappeared. There was a lot of testimony about a party that was held the night before the assassination. And some of the people there were Lyndon Baines Johnson, the head of the FBI, some of the Secret Service agents. It's reported by a witness that Lyndon Baines Johnson was talking about those Kennedys are not going to be a problem for me after tomorrow. A fingerprint of one of his right-hand men was found in the 6th floor of the school book depository. These are all facts, guys. Every bit of these are facts. Now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. There were a lot of investigations. Well, not really. There were 2 investigations into the murder of Kennedy. The first one was the Warren Report. That's named after Chief Justice Earl Warren. It was the Warren Report. He was one of the investigators. And one of the lead people in charge of this particular Warren Report, looking into the assassination of Kennedy officially for the United States government, was Allen Dulles. the number one CIA man that Kennedy fired. He was one of the men in charge of the Warren Report. One of the other men that were on the Warren Report was Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford went on to become president of the United States, and he got in miraculous. He wasn't even voted in. You see, they scandalized Spiro Agnew, the vice president to Richard Nixon. They scandalized Agnew and got him to resign. And Nixon made Ford his vice president. And then when Nixon resigned, Ford took his place. And this was a man that was on the Warren Report. Another man that was involved in the investigation and etc. was Richard Milhous Nixon, who also became president. Isn't that amazing? Another fellow, the fellow that came up with what they call the magic bullet theory, a fellow named Arlen Specter, guys. Arlen Specter. Arlen Specter went on to be a senator for like the next 138 years. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but he had multi-decade, 3 or 4 decades, 5 decades long, a very, very long career as a senator. So all of these men profited from the death of Kennedy. And all of these men just happened to be on the Warren, the investigation known as the Warren Report, that declared, no, the lone nut did it. Now, most people don't understand, though, and most people are not aware that the second report, though, called the HSCA, the House Select Committee of Assassinations. The House Select Committee of Assassination was done, many years later, after the Warren Report. It was done after the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. And they were supposedly looking into all of these assassinations. Well, they came away regarding the Kennedy assassination, declaring that it was a conspiracy and there was more than one person involved. And that some of those bullets came from the grassy knoll. That's what they concluded. And you almost never hear of that, but read it for yourself. They still go with the lone nut theory. But then as we come down through time now, we kept going to war and going to war. Now, in the 1960s, also about this time, when Kennedy and all these other people are about to be killed, we have a movement going on. It's called Neoconservatism. I don't know if you guys have heard of neoconservatism or not, or neoconservatives. They also became known as compassionate conservatives. That term came popular around the time George Bush Jr. was in office. About the time he was getting ready to serve, they became known as compassionate conservatives. But you see, the neoconservative political movement began in the 1960s. And do you know where it came from? Oh my goodness, hear me out. And let this help us wake up to what's going on today. because this is amazing, amazing information, my friend. The neoconservative movement began in the 1960s when a bunch of Democrats took exception with the rest of the Democratic Party because they weren't hawkish enough to go to war. And they came over to the Republican Party. And there's a great number of these Democrats that came over to the Republican Party just because they wanted to go to war. They were highly invested in all of these companies that make weapons of war. For instance, the Carlyle Group, the Saudis were part of that, Bush part of that, almost his entire cabinet was invested in the Carlyle Group, and they did everything from make bullets for cop guns to helicopters, blah, 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 missiles, you name it. Well, anyway, so you have a bunch of Democrats that are hawkish, that want to go to war, but yet they're ultra liberal in their policies. They just love to go to war, but they are ultra liberal. These are the ones that you see pushing the homosexuality agenda, the trans agenda that you see going on today. These are the ones that you see talking about the gender fluid, blah, blah, blah. All of this is coming from this branch of the Democrats. And it's the very same branch of people that came over and joined the Republican Party in the 1960s. And then they began to run for both parties and being put into position. So both parties have an absolutely left-wing, hawkish position. That ensures that the military-industrial, political media complex stays thriving, my friends. So these neoconservatives were men like George Bush Jr., Cheney, Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, Elliott Abrams, Richard Pearl, Paul Bremer. All of these guys. Now, them and all of their cronies now. Pardon me while I get a drink, guys. They had a bunch of cronies. They had a bunch of associations. It's like, they're political organizers, guys. You know, the Obama type. They get people, they have people everywhere, trying to build this up. So they form a group called PNAC. That is the, oh gosh. Anyway, the idea of PNAC, PNAC. An hour ago, I could have told you what that was. Right now, it just slips my head, but that's okay. But PNAC, PNAC, you can Google that. I'll tell you what it is, though. Oh, it's the Project for the New American Century. That's what it is. You got to excuse me, guys. I don't have any notes in front of me. Project for New American Century. So, this Project for the New American Century, what is that? That is a think tank that was put together by this neoconservative group. And what they're talking about keeping war. They have all of these targets set up that they want to overthrow. And they're going to keep war going for years and years and years this way. It's guaranteed. The project for the new American century, look at it. It's all about getting more military hardware so we can do this and do this and do this. And we're going to keep this going and overthrow this nation and that one. And, all the evil nations. We're just going to overthrow them. So they go on to say, though, we're about 10 years behind. And so what we need, and I swear to you, they say this, what we need is a Pearl Harbor-like attack on the nation. Something devastating that we can get the whole nation behind us so that we can enact all of this stuff. And they go on to describe things like the Patriot Act. And so that we can also put all of this extra money into military hardware. Of course, we got to keep those wars going, and you can't keep those going without military hardware. And these guys are our partners in this crime. We are heavily invested in this, boys, so come on. Anyway. So what they've done effectively, and I've told people this for years, we don't have two parties in our government. Ask Trump. Trump will tell you every single word I'm telling you right now is true, and I'll bet he knows it. But these guys have taken over our country. It was a successful coup, my friend. And what they did to Trump in our last election, in my opinion, is absolute proof that, man, they have taken complete control of everything. So they come up with PNAC, the project for the new American century, and they talk about beefing up our defenses and etc. And they talk about we need a new Pearl Harbor event so that we can propel this stuff back into action and gain all this 10 years of lost time that we're behind now. And so guess what happens? George Bush Jr., their boy, gets elected. Guess what happens after that? 9/11. Guess what happens after that? Well, we know bin Laden's in Pakistan, but no. There's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We got to go get those. And of course, there were no weapons of mass destruction because Iraq spent them all in their war against Iran years earlier. He talked Cheney into backing his story. Oh, Cheney probably led him through it. Colin Powell, though, hesitantly went before the world, the United Nations, asking them to back us. Of course, our Western allies did, but the United Nations didn't want to. And I think they made the right decision. But we overthrew Iraq, didn't we? We showed them. Now, we made up a good excuse to invade Iraq, when we should have years earlier, but that's another story. At any rate, later on down the road, along comes the euro and gold. And so some of your leaders get together, and you see they've been working through the petrodollar and working under our restrictions and etc. And they figure, well, we can make more money if we bring in some of these other people and do business with them. So, yeah, Hussein started selling a little bit of oil for euros and gold. Boom, he was killed. Even though he'd been our ally for all these years. Anyway, Colonel Gaddafi says, he's talking to all the other oil producers about America is, got us under their thumb, and we need to come out from underneath it and start accepting the euro. And then all of a sudden, boom, we didn't like Gaddafi. He's dead. These are just facts, my friend. And now we have President Trump, pretty much a political prisoner here in the United States of America, the free United States of America, the home of the brave, land of the free. I don't know about all that. I don't see many brave people left at all, guys. Not many. Not many. So these are just interesting points, guys, that I think we should all take into consideration to help us understand where we are in this world today, where we are in this nation today. And, my channel might pay a price for this little video, but that's okay. Stefan asks, didn't America originally train Castro? Yeah. Yeah. And Gaddafi and all these. Look up the School of America and then type in all of these people and you'll see they attended it. That's a United States, you might as well say training camp. School of America. But that goes way back, I guess, to the 60s, 70s. So these are all really weird facts, guys. What can you say about all of this? When Trump was in office, it seems for some reason he left some of those papers classified. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about that. The classification of those papers. They took all of the information, all of it, all of the findings, everything. And they classified each and every little piece. Now, over the years, they've declassified some of it. But what they said was, we're putting this away for, I think it was 50 years, something like that. Yeah, 50 years. We're classifying this information for 50 years. In 50 years, we're going to unseal it all. That's what they said. But it was also said that was so the people who were involved would be dead by the time it was time to open those papers. But guess what? Those Bushes have lived a long time, my friend. They're still around. So not all the papers have been released. There's a bunch of them that are still classified that they won't release. President Trump probably knows what they are, because President Trump has already had a look at them and decided what he was going to release. Now, it could be that he strategically held some of this information back that he could use against people that are still alive today. Because you see, this compassionate conservative, neoconservative thing, when you bring it up through time, it came up through the Bushes, through the Clintons. They're also part of the same cartel. They're buddies. They were never, ever, ever mortal enemies. They've always worked together. They've always been in the business together for a very long time, my friends. So it came down through the Bushes and up through the Clintons. And then, of course, through Obama. He's part of the same crew, part of the same camp, Obama. And so was McCain, Christie. These are your compassionate conservative neoconservatives. Jeb Bush, all of these guys. So, yeah, now you know why we have been doomed to this eternal warfare. These people have been in this all along. They're all invested in it in every possible way. And once you corrupt an organization, guys, you build that corruption. And you build the people underneath you, you build the people over you, and you build a cocoon to protect yourself. That's what these people have done. Now, we got a lot of things coming on us right now. So if you would, bear these things in mind. We are living in a very precarious time. God bless you guys. Have a good night.